Welcome to Meteorology Matters. We're diving into some pretty significant potential shifts in U.S. government funding for climate and weather research today.
Yes, focusing on proposed changes at NOAA and NASA. The information suggests some, well, concerning potential impacts on research and our ability to predict future conditions.
Right, so our mission today is to unpack these proposals, figure out what areas are affected, and what the bigger picture implications might be.
Exactly, understanding the ripple effects.
Okay, let's start with NOAA. What's the big headline there? What jumps out?
Well, the scale, really. The Trump administration is proposing to essentially eliminate NOAA's Climate Research Division. That's the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, or OAR.
Eliminate. That sounds drastic.
It is. Think of OAR as NOAA's core for understanding climate change. The proposal would cut its funding by about $485 million.
Wow. Leaving it with how much?
Just over $171 million. And, the internal documents apparently suggest that level would effectively eliminate OAR as a functioning office.
So not just a trim. This is aiming to dismantle a major part of the U.S. climate research infrastructure.
That seems to be the thrust of it, yes. The plan goes further, looking to end funding for NOAA's climate research centers entirely.
And the scientists.
And cut hundreds of federal and academic scientists, the ones actually studying human-driven global warming.
Okay, let's break that down. What specific things would disappear if OAR funding is cut like that?
Well, all funding for their climate, weather, and ocean labs. And the cooperative institutes they partner with.
How many labs are we talking about?
NOAA has 10 research labs nationwide. You've got ocean centers in Florida and Washington, atmospheric labs in Colorado, Maryland.
The Severe Storm Lab in Oklahoma.
Exactly. And the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Lab in New Jersey, GFDL, which is huge for modeling. Plus a Great Lakes lab. And they fund university scientists, too.
So it's the federal labs and the academic network they support.
Correct. And the proposal would also end NOAA's Competitive Climate Research Grants program.
How much is that worth?
It gives out about $70 million a year to academic researchers. Cutting that, well, it would really damage the wider climate research field in the U.S.
So who picks up that research if the funding just vanishes? That's a big question.
A very big question. And it gets more granular, too. Support for collecting regional climate data could be terminated.
You mean the data that, like, agriculture uses?
Yeah.
For planting decisions and things like that?
Precisely. That detailed, practical information.
Okay, so this isn't just high-level science. It hits practical sectors.
Absolutely. And other things, too, like the National Oceanographic Partnership Program, college sea grants, aquaculture grants, all potentially ending.
And the National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science.
Also on the chopping block, according to the proposal.
It sounds like a really broad sweep across climate and ocean science within NOAA.
And there's more. The National Ocean Service could be cut in half.
Half? Wow. What does that entail?
The proposal language is pretty specific. No funding for integrated ocean observing system, regional observations, competitive research, coastal zone management grants, National Coastal Resilience Fund, or the National Estuarine Research Reserve System.
So basically, programs for watching and protecting coastlines, sea level data, coastal erosion monitoring, gone.
That's what the proposal suggests. It's like dismantling the infrastructure for understanding our coasts.
And it extends to satellites, too, right? The weather satellites managed by NSDIs.
Yes, radical changes proposed there, too. Potentially cutting instruments on the next-gen geostationary satellites.
What kind of instruments?
Things that track atmospheric pollution, ocean color, infrared sounders.
The sounders are really key for storm forecasting, aren't they? Understanding atmospheric structure.
Crucial. And lightning mappers, too. It seems the focus might be narrowing to just basic weather data, ignoring these vital environmental links.
It's like wanting the forecast without understanding the ingredients. What about the data archives?
The National Center for Environmental Information, the main climate data archive, facing an $18 million cut.
That's where all the historical records are kept. Reducing funding there seems risky for long-term understanding.
It definitely raises questions about data integrity and access. Plus, another proposed cut of $141 million for just mission support for satellites and data systems. That could really hamper operations.
It really does paint a picture of a major rollback. And there was something about personnel, too. Staff being fired.
Yes, that's another angle. Hundreds of probationary workers at NOAA, specialists in areas like El Niño, La Niña tracking, severe storm risks, climate change impacts. They were refired after a court ruling temporarily reinstated them.
So losing expertise as well as funding.
Exactly. A lot of uncertainty and disruption for the people doing the work.
Okay, let's pivot to NASA. The situation there sounds, well, maybe even more dramatic in scale.
It does. An early version of the budget proposal suggested cutting NASA's entire science budget by nearly half.
Half. From what to what?
From around $7.3 billion down to about $3.9 billion.
That is huge. Which science areas would take the biggest hits?
Astrophysics, heliophysics, the study of the sun, and earth science are all looking at massive reductions. Well over 50% cuts proposed for each.
Let's see. Astrophysics cut by 2/3. Heliophysics even more.
That's right. And earth science down from about $2.2 billion to just over $1 billion.
$1 billion for Earth science. The material suggested that could mean shutting down satellites. And maybe even closing NASA Goddard.
That was mentioned as a potential consequence, yes. Goddard is a huge center for Earth observation. Closing it would be a major blow.
Senator Van Hollen mentioned that concern, I recall.
He did. And planetary science, while maybe a smaller percentage cut at 30%, could still see major impacts.
Like stopping the Mars sample return mission.
That was flagged as a potential casualty, yes. A very high-profile, ambitious mission.
And it's not just future plans, right? Existing or nearly ready missions, too.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Missions like Da Vinci Eye to Venus and even the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope.
But isn't the Roman telescope almost built, ready to launch fairly soon?
Largely complete, scheduled for launch possibly as early as September 2026. Canceling something that advanced, it does seem incredibly wasteful.
Casey Dreyer from the Planetary Society had strong words for it, didn't he?
He called the overall NASA science cuts an extinction-level event, highlighting the waste of terminating missions already underway or near completion.
Okay, let's talk about the Princeton funding cuts. This seemed much more targeted.
It did. Nearly $4 million in federal funding cut, specifically for climate change research there, which is a collaboration with NOAA.
And the administration gave a specific reason.
Yes. The stated rationale was that the research promoted, quote, exaggerated and implausible climate threats and increased climate anxiety among young Americans.
There's quite a justification for cutting scientific funding.
It is notable. And they cut the Cooperative Institute for modeling the Earth system, the NOAA-Princeton collaboration.
Isn't that the program where Sukuro Manabe worked, the Nobel Prize winner for climate modeling?
The very same. He won the Nobel in Physics in 2021 for work done through that program. So yes, cutting funding for a Nobel laureate-producing institute.
Wow. And it wasn't just the high-level modeling, right? Educational parts, too?
Correct. Educational initiatives aimed at K-12 students run by that program also lost funding.
So hitting research and education about climate science.
And other projects, too. A 5-year study on water availability changes due to global warming. Another predicting coastal flood impacts from rainfall and sea level rise.
Those sound incredibly practical, vital research for communities.
They do. And perhaps most worrying was the signal that more cuts might come.
How so?
The Commerce Department, which houses NOAA, is reportedly reviewing all grants with terms like climate science, climate crisis, clean energy, environmental quality, and pollution.
That suggests a much broader potential effort to defund environmental research based on keywords.
It certainly points in that direction.
Okay, so we've laid out the proposed cuts. What has the reaction been? We touched on some expert views.
Right. Senator Chris Van Hollen, for example, believes there will be strong bipartisan pushback in Congress.
He called it eating your seed corn, didn't he? Damaging for the future.
Yes, highlighting impacts on space, national security, tech leadership. He seemed fairly optimistic about congressional resistance.
But others were more alarmed. Like Craig McLean, the former head of NOAA's OAR.
Very alarmed. He said the NOAA cuts wouldn't just gut the research, they'd shut it down. He used the phrase back to the 1950s in terms of climate understanding.
That's a stark warning. And Representative Lofgren
called the NOAA plan outrageous and dangerous, specifically warning it would harm weather forecasting capabilities, which affects everyone, day to day.
Good point. It's not just long-term climate stuff. And international scientists weighed in, too.
Yes. Valérie Masson-Delmotte from France reminded us that, ignoring climate risks doesn't make them vanish. Undermining the science just leaves people less prepared.
Makes sense. And Rick Spinrad, the former NOAA administrator, had strong words about the Princeton cuts specifically.
He did, called it a slap in the face and nose-thumbing at Dr. Manabe's Nobel-winning work. And he stressed the practical importance, like needing good precipitation forecasts for so many sectors.
Okay, so pulling this all together, The picture emerging is one of potentially really significant shifts in U.S. government support for climate, weather, and even space science.
Definitely. These proposed cuts to NOAA and NASA and the specific targeting of university research, like at Princeton, they raise fundamental questions about the future direction of scientific understanding and prediction in the U.S.
The potential consequences seem vast, from basic Earth system science, space exploration, all the way to practical weather forecasts and climate models that industries and, frankly, all of us rely on.
It's a complex situation touching on many facets of science and society.
And it's still developing, right? Congress ultimately holds the purse strings and can change these proposals.
Absolutely. These are proposals, not final budgets yet.
So staying informed is key. And really thinking about what these potential changes could mean. What stands out most to you from all this? What questions does it bring up for you personally?
Yeah, it makes you consider the long-term priorities.
We encourage everyone listening to keep following this. You can follow meteorologist Rob Jones on Instagram, that's meteorologist, on TikTok, TV meteorologist, and on YouTube, follow Rob Jones Hurricane. You can also find the Meteorology Matters podcast playlist there for more discussions like this one.
Definitely keep engaged with the topic.
And maybe a final thought to leave folks with. Think about the long-term consequences of prioritizing some science over others. If these changes happen, what knowledge might we lose? What future discoveries or warnings might we miss?
That's the critical question, isn't it? What are the downstream effects of decisions made today?